Mendel is known as the father of genetics because of his groundbreaking work on inheritance in pea plants 150 years ago. Gregor Johann Mendel was a monk and teacher with interest in astronomy and plant breeding. He was born in 1822 and at 21 he joined a monastery in Brunn. The monastery had a botanical garden and library and was a center for science, religion and culture. In 1856 Mendel began a series of experiments at the monastery to find out how traits are passed from generation to generation. At the time, it was thought that parents' traits were blended together in their progeny. Mendel studied inheritance in peas, Pisum sativum. He chose pea because they had been used for similar studies, are easy to grow and can be sown each year. Pea flowers contains both male and female parts called stamen and stigma and usually self-pollinate. Self-pollination happens before the flowers open, so progeny are produced from a single plant. Peas can also be cross-pollinated by hand simply by opening the flowers' buds to remove their pollen, producing a stamen and dusting pollen from one plant onto the stigma of another. To cross-pollinate peas, pollen from the stamen of one plant is transferred to the stigma of another. Before the transfer, the anthers must be removed from the recipient plant to prevent self-pollination. Mendel followed the inheritance of 7 traits in pea plants and each trait had 2 forms. He identified pure breeding pea plants that consistently showed one form of a traits after generation of self-pollination. Mendel crossbred peas with 7 pairs of pure bred traits. First generation F1 progeny only showed the dominant traits, but recessive traits repaired in the self-pollinated second generation F2 plants in a 3:1 ratio of dominant to recessive traits. Mendel then crossed these pure breeding lines of plants and recorded the traits of the hybrid progeny. He found that all of the first generation F1 hybrid looked like one of the parent plants. For example, all the progeny of a purple and white flowers cross were purple. However, when he allowed the hybrid plants to self-pollinate, the hidden traits would repair in the second generation F2 hybrid plants. Mendel described each of the traits variants as dominant or recessive. Dominant traits like purple flower color appeared in the F1 hybrids, whereas recessive traits like white flowers colors did not. Mendel did thousands of cross-breeding experiments. This key finding was that there were 3 times as many dominant as recessive traits in F2 pea plants, 3:1 ratio. Mendel crossed pure lines of pea plants. Dominant trait like purple flower color appeared in the first generation hybrid F1, whereas recessive traits like white flower color were masked. However, recessive traits repaired in second generation F2 pea plants in a ratio of 3:1 dominant to recessive. Mendel also experimented to see what would happen if plants with 2 or more pure bred traits were cross bred. He found that each trait was inherited independently of the other, and principle of independent assortment. Mendel did not stop there. He continued to allow the peas to self-pollinate over several years, whilst closely recording the characteristic of the progeny. He may have grown as many as 30,000 pea plants over 7 years. When Gregor Mendel published his theory of inheritance in 1865, it should have been another 35 years before his theory would be discovered and then accepted. In 1866, Mendel published the paper Experiments in Plant Hybridization. In it, he proposed that heredity is the result of each parent passing along one factor for every trait. If the factor is dominant, it will be expressed in the progeny. If the factor is recessive, it will not show up but will continue to be passed along to the next generation. Each factor works independently from the others and they do not blend. The science community ignored the paper possibly because it was ahead of the ideas of heredity and variation accepted at the time. In the early 1900s, 3 plant biologists finally acknowledged Mendel's work. Unfortunately, Mendel was not around to receive the recognition as he had died in 1884.